Welcome to Action Island NBA Finals Edition presented by FanDuel. I'm Maria Marino, joined by our NBA crew, Chris Raybon, Matt Moore, and his Action Flamingo, and Gilles Gallant. We are going to work our way around the island and get a pair of best bets from each of the guys. The Island Council will vote on their favorite picks along the way as we build a same game parlay for Mavericks, Celtics, game one. Oh, baby, it's finally here. Okay, before we get into it, I'd like to do a little warm up here. And it's interesting because obviously the Celtics are the favorites, but I'm seeing a lot of the public on both the Mavs tonight and in the series. Matt, why do you think that is?
I mean, this is honestly one of the biggest public dogs we've ever seen in the finals. And I talked to some bookmakers this week, and you can read that article in the Action Network app, put it up today, that talks about kind of why they priced the series the way they did, both for game one and in the series. And the answer kind of comes down to the big word that was used was perception, that the Mavs are perceived to have had this really tough road, beating three teams with 50-plus wins, and the Celtics basically beat up on a bad Eastern Conference with a bunch of injuries. And so that's played a huge part into how this series was priced. What's interesting is I think that the Boston Celtics were largely overpriced in the three Eastern Conference series that they were in. And then this one, I think they're severely underpriced based off of that overreaction. One bookmaker told me they priced it because they were like, we're going to price it this way because we knew we'd still take Dallas action. And they have. They're still taking huge amounts of money, both on the series and in game one. This is the most public side I think a dog has been in the finals in quite some time.
So just real quick, I know, Raybon, you have bet the Celtics in the series. We've talked about it on various shows on Action Network. Why were you comfortable with the pricing the way it was? And do you expect a long series?
Yeah, I mean, so Boston just has so many matchup advantages in this series. And I do think there's a lot of recency bias with Dallas because Dallas exceeded expectations. Like, people didn't really expect Dallas as a number 5 seed to get this far. A lot of people didn't even expect them to get out of the first round against the Clippers. I actually did expect Dallas to be here. I thought they were the best team in the West, but I think this is just a horrible matchup for them. I think Minnesota, they matched up really well against. I think Boston is the opposite. I think the 5 out for Boston, shooters everywhere. You don't need as much rim protection. It's just, there's a lot of take your pick of bad matchup. So I expect the Celtics to win this series in 6 or fewer games. If it gets to 7, I'd be worried, just because now you're betting against Luka, and Matt has said this too. Now you're betting against Luka Doncic in a game 7, but I think the Celtics have a considerable edge here. And so I think I understand why people are on Dallas. I mean, it's the NBA Finals, but we've seen here these underdogs are overvalued in terms of series prices in the NBA Finals. When you have a favorite, anything above minus 180 since the merger way back in 77, the favorites are 28-3 if they're listed at a series price of above minus 180.
Well, Gilles, I don't want to leave you out. Just a quick word before we get into our same game parlay. Who you got, man? Celtics or Mavs?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be leaning to the Celtics in 6. I think part of the reason, too, of why maybe there's a lot more money coming in on Dallas is they're just the new shiny toy. I think we're kind of basketball fatigue about Boston, especially with the way that they got put out last year and then following in the finals. I think a lot of people are kind of in a position now where they think, I'm not going to bet on them or feel good about them winning the title until I actually see it. And I think that's part of the reason why you're probably seeing a little more action on Boston, especially because they do have the best player.
All right. Well,
or the Mavs, rather.
I got you. We are going to get everybody's best bets, but first, want to remind all of our viewers, Action Island is presented by FanDuel. Sign up at FanDuel Sportsbook today and get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. For new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. New users in Massachusetts and Ohio will receive $300 in bonus bets. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. So without further ado, let's get everybody's best bets. Chris Raybon, you're up first. What do you like tonight?
So for my first bet, I'm going with the Celtics on the spread -6.5. And, I already talked about some of the things I like matchup wise. I think some other things, Kristaps Porzingis, he had the same box plus minus as Jason Tatum, very valuable to this team. And I think his post ups are going to be key. Matt has talked a lot about that as well, but Dallas has struggled even on this defensive run post trade for Gafford in Washington. Dallas has struggled with its post defense. So I think adding Porzingis back helps. Also, if you just look, Dallas had been to the conference finals a couple years ago and lost. So, Dallas kind of running through the West, wasn't worried about them as opposed to a team like a Minnesota who had, hadn't been there before. But now we get to the finals. Boston's been here before a couple years ago. They took their lumps. They learned from them. But also Boston, one thing they did do, even though they lost that series to Golden State, they did go on the road and win game one. So I think Boston's going to show up focused here. I think, they got their scare in the last round against Indiana and somehow stole that game, but they pretty much took care of business in the other two game ones. I know people worry about Boston at home a little bit in the playoffs, but also if we look at the last matchup, these two teams did play post the Washington and Gafford trades. And that was on March 1st. Boston with a 138-110 win over Dallas. Everybody pretty much was healthy for that game. Boston won each and every quarter, all four of them in that game. So it just speaks to the fact that Boston is a very good team. Yes, Dallas has the best player and maybe two of the top four, but, Boston has, all the other, top 6, 7, maybe even 8. So I just think this is a very balanced team. And then game one, 17-2 straight up our favorites since 2005 against the spread, 16-3, 84% finals game one favorites since 05, according to our Action Labs data. And just because people may be curious, the trend does not hold up in the first half, in case you're thinking of, maybe I get a little better of a number, with the first half. In the first half, it's pretty much 50-50, but it's these favorites. The better team tends to pull away later in the game. At least that's been the trend. So my first pick, Boston -6.5. And then second pick, Jaylen Brown over 23.5 points. Love him for MVP in this series. I think he's undervalued. So expected him to start off hot. He's had 24 or more in 9 of 14 postseason games. He had 34 in 37 minutes in one of the matchups against Dallas and 25 in 31 minutes in the other. So he's averaging 29.5 in 34 minutes against Dallas. He's well rested. So I expect him to play about 40 minutes in this contest. And with Kristaps Porzingis on the floor, it's Jaylen Brown that actually averages more points and field goal attempts than Jason Tatum, and Brown also more field goal attempts than Tatum in both of the matchups against Dallas thus far this season. So I like Jaylen Brown to do his thing and keep his hot streak going.
Couple of compelling bets, and I love how we are getting started right away with, taking a side here as a possibility, but let's all put it to a vote and see where we land. All right, let's see the votes.
Unanimous.
Unanimous. Unanimous. I mean, for me, like the historical data that you've referenced, Raybon, both for game one and the series is too tough to ignore, in addition to the matchup issues. But also, I just feel like Boston, they need this game one way more than Dallas, in my opinion. Like Dallas can be like, if we lose game one, we're still alive. Like, it's fine. But let me get somebody else's opinion on this. Gilles, why did you go with Boston on the spread here?
Yeah, this one was tough because I really like Jaylen Brown in this game, but they just have so many different offensive weapons that they could probably cover the 6.5 and he could fall to 22 points. So that was just the only possibility. But again, if he's talking about whether or not he's going to take Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum, I'm with him. I'm fading Jason Tatum as much as possible in this series.
Oh man, the Jason Tatum hate is already making itself known here on the show. But look, we have the first leg of our same game parlay, Boston -6.5 Let's move on to Matt Moore. And Matt, what are your best bets for game one?
All right, let's go with Drew Holiday over 4.5 assists. So with Kristaps Porzingis, he's over this in 55% of his last 30 games, including 6 versus Dallas. More importantly, though, this is a matchup thing. The Mavs are going to roam off Holiday. You have to choose somebody that you're going to bring help from, and they're going to bring help off of Drew Holiday. They're going to dare him to hit corner threes. Now, the thing is that Drew's a point guard, and so if you throw him the ball and he's open, even if he's not feeling like it's a great look, if he thinks that there's a window, he'll drive and then kick. He's also one of the best on this team in transition assists. He's actually their leader in transition assists on a per game basis this season and in the playoffs. He's really good at finding those little opportunities in open space, and the Mavericks transition defense isn't excellent. This is a low number, I think, for Drew, given how much I think the ball will go through him. They're going to try and hide Luka Doncic on him at times, and guess what the Celtics will do? They will put him as the screener in pick and roll situations, which is going to open up him on the short roll for, again, a very good passer. So I want to lean in here. I don't want Holiday points. I don't want Holiday rebounds, even though he had a fantastic rebound performance in that game that Chris mentioned, the last one after the trades. I do want the assist, though. I'll take Drew Holiday over 4.5 assists for my first bet. For my second one, I want PJ Washington over 16.5 points and rebounds. He's 60% on this over his last 30 games. He's going to wind up in a lot of weird cross matches in this series. So the Celtics are going to do some weird stuff where Jason Tatum's actually going to guard the bigs a little bit in this series to try and cut off the pre-switches there, to try and deny the 1-5, which means that on various situations, the Mavs will then use PJ as a screener, so he'll get guards on him, and he'll shoot over him in straight-up matchups. So let's just, go back to the basics here. Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford guarding PJ Washington in those kind of units if they're not guarding him with a pure center. If you look at those situations, PJ's going to be able to fire, and he'll have space. Those centers have to back up and give him room to be able to shoot there. So I think there's an opportunity there to get in on that. Plus, if he's matched up with the guards, he's also going to have a lot of opportunities for rebounds here. So I like this quite a bit. PJ Washington over 16.5 points and rebounds is my second best bet.
Fantastic. Couple of great options once again. Everybody else, let's vote on what we like best. Let's see the votes. All right. Once again, a sweep. Oh my goodness. By the way, Raybon, did you do bubble letters on your
I did.
there? How the heck? How'd you pull that off? And furthermore, why do you like Drew?
I mean, it's simple for me. I think, Boston at home, I like Boston to win the game. And I just don't want to bet on an over on a role player in his first finals game. I love PJ, but, over on a role player on a team I expect to lose. Not really with it on the road, too.
That's a really good point. I mean, for me, I didn't give the PJ look too much thought just because I was so intrigued by Drew Holiday, and he just makes the right play. Like that's really what it comes down to. And so I trust him to do that. So we have our second leg of the parlay, Drew Holiday over 4.5 assists. And that means Gilles Gallant, it's your turn. What are your best bets for game one?
All right, well, we're going to go back to Captain Complainer. We're taking Luka Doncic, and we're going to take his points over 31.5 points. So Doncic averages 28.5 points in the playoffs, but he just faced the number 1 ranked defense in the NBA during the regular season and went over this in 4 or 5 games. And now, with the balky knee, got nearly a week of rest between series. And when Luka gets rest, the points come, because 3 days rest this year, he's had 10 games where he's had 3 or more days of rest. He's averaging 35.6 points per game. And he played both games against Boston this year. He had 33 and 37, also had a triple-double in those games with a 42% usage rate, attempted at least 25 shots in both of those games, and plays well in Boston. Even last year, he scored 42 points playing in Boston. And the Celtics defense, they're going to give a little. So I think they're prone to some big scoring nights from primary scoring options. Like you saw Donovan Mitchell have a big game against them, Tyrese Halliburton, even Pascal Siakam ended up having like a 28-point a game against them. Andrew Nembhard had a 32-point game against this team. So if Doncic is playing 40 minutes and taking 20 or more shots, which I think are pretty fair projections, he could clear this by the start of the fourth quarter. So Luka Doncic over 31.5 points is the first option. And on the other side, we're going to go with Kristaps Porzingis, and we're going to have him hit at least 2 3-pointers tonight. And again, we've talked about Kristaps Porzingis a lot about how he unlocks the Celtics offense, but I've been looking at his shooting splits, and he is so much better of a shooter at home. He has averaged over 2 3-point makes per home game. And if you include the playoffs, he's hit this in 10 of the last 15 home games. And for the year, 21 of 30 games in Boston. That's a 70% hit rate when he's playing at home. Daniel Gafford, he'll likely start, but I think he's going to get played off the floor. Much easier for the Celtics to spread him out on the perimeter. So if Kristaps is back and he's healthy and he's back to 100%, I mean, would it shock anybody to see 11-2 first time out from the Mavs with 2 threes from Kristaps in the first quarter? I've seen that happen many times. So I think that's what we should look at. So Kristaps Porzingis over 1.5 3-pointers, or Luka Doncic over 31.5 points.
Luka Doncic. I don't think it would shock any of us if the highest points prop on the board actually hit, just because it's Luka, and then KP back, and hopefully back with a vengeance. But let's put it to a vote as far as which we like best for the parlay. All right, let's see the votes. Okay. Oh, all right. We have our first dissension among the ranks. Raybon, I see the bubble letters once again. But first, Matt, just curious what drew you to the Kristaps Porzingis threes, although our vote goes to Luka.
I mean, it looks it's very possible for the Celtics to win this game if Luka has a big game. Like, that's happened before. That happened in the last matchup. I get it. But if we're talking about from Raybon's perspective of the role player having a big game, like, I don't know. I don't really want to, if we have Celtics minus 6.5, I don't really want to be like, yeah, Luka scored 35 and lost. I don't love that type of feeling. I liked KP a lot here in the spot, just because I think he'll have a lot of opportunities in pick and pop scenarios. Like, that's a sequence they can get to very easily because of where the Mavs defense is at. I will say that, like, actively, this is like what I ultimately decided. I was very torn because during the show, I actually kind of heard some things on text. People were texting me saying that there's a possibility that KP may play fewer minutes than we might think tonight. That's not confirmed. That's not from Joe Mazzulla or anything, but something to kind of keep in mind with these kind of props. So I was glad that the two of you took Luka. So I get to dissent. And if I'm right, great. And if not, then the parlay will still hit.
Look, theoretically, Porzingis should play really well. I still think there is a little bit of hesitancy, for me anyway, just because we haven't seen this guy play in a minute. But Raybon, what did you think, and why did you ultimately vote Luka?
I mean, I'm betting on Boston. I like Boston for the series. I don't want to bet against Luka any more than I have to. But if you want to put some numbers to it, 33 points in 40 minutes in the first matchup against the Celtics, and they lost by 9. He was a minus 13 in that game, still scored 33. And then in the matchup post the trades for Gafford and Washington, 37 points in 37 minutes, a minus 20. And Dallas lost that game by 28. So I am perfectly comfortable backing Boston and still not fading Luka.
Look at you coming prepared with the numbers as per usual. All right, that means we have 3 legs for our same game parlay. So let's recap what we like. And the first leg was via Raybon. That's Boston minus 6.5. And then Matt Moore came in with Drew Holiday over 4.5 assists. And Gilles Gallant likes Luka over 31.5 points in game 1. We're seeing odds of about plus 535 right now. Not too bad. And this is the time of the show I like to give a little bonus bet. So I'm going to go right into it. I like Drew Holiday to go over 12.5 points. This is something that he has cleared in 8 of the last 10 games. And I know Kristaps Porzingis is coming back, and that could maybe provide some question marks, but I just think Drew's role is very consistent with or without KP. He averaged 12.5 on the season. And, looking at that March 1st matchup against Dallas, Drew only had 11 points, but he also only played 27 minutes because of a blowout. He hasn't played fewer than 33 minutes in this postseason. And the biggest thing is this: Drew has been here before, and you know what? He's been asked to do way more in the postseason prior in his career than what he's being asked to do on this team. He is perfectly capable of scoring. He's just super steadying, super poised. I trust him. I think he's going to get open looks with all of Boston's other weapons. Now, I did think long and hard about going over on the points and assists, which was at about 17 or so, because I really do like everything that Matt said about the assist side of things. But ultimately, landed on this. And Drew, I think this is an attainable number. Hopefully, as Raybon predicts, Boston will win this game somewhat comfortably and everything's flowing. And that includes my guy, Drew Holiday. But Matt Moore, you did say that you didn't want Drew's points. So, I mean, hit me with it. Why not?
I just get worried about Drew Holiday versus actual defenses that aren't the Indiana Pacers. Drew's history of shooting in the playoffs, especially with the Bucks, was yikes. Like, he's just not been a great playoff shooter. Now, look, he's been nails from the corner all season for Boston, just absolutely nails. And those are the kind of looks that he's going to get. And if he knocks him down, you're going to cruise over this. So if we don't get caught up in the narrative that Drew Holiday struggles in terms of maybe not choking up, but just like a little bit of throat tightening in the playoffs, then we're totally fine here. It just makes me personally nervous having bet on the Bucks and having lost so many times. So that's where I come from, but I don't think this is a bad play at all if we look at the overall structure of what we think the game flow is going to be.
Look, I don't mind you raining on my parade. It's fine. Look, that's what we do here. But listen, if you did want to throw this in to the parlay, you would get odds of around plus 967. So somewhat enticing there. Hey, I can't believe we actually have an NBA Finals game tonight. Looking forward to it. Can't wait to see how this all turns out. This has been Action Island presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. So for Chris Raybon, Matt Moore, and Jill Gallant, I'm Maria Marino. Oh, I don't want to forget the Action Flamingo. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy game one, everybody. We'll see you soon.